$7,500. The voice cut through the auction hall's expectant hush like shattering glass, sharp, loud, and sickeningly familiar. My breath caught, trapped somewhere between my lungs and my throat. My head whipped around, eyes finding her instantly near the back.
Chloe.
My ex-best friend. She held paddle number 184 high, a defiant, almost predatory smirk plastered across her face. A wave of icy dread washed over me, instantly extinguishing the fragile spark of hope I'd carried into the room. $7,500? For my painting? The estimate hadn't even been close to that. This wasn't support. This wasn't admiration. This was something twisted. Knowing Chloe, knowing the bitter way things had ended between us, I knew in my gut this was the opening move in a game designed purely to humiliate and destroy me on what should have been the most important night of my career. My stomach plummeted. She was here to sabotage me, and she was doing it with a smile. Before Chloe reappeared like a phantom limb, I thought I'd finally stopped feeling. My life was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, the kind specific to artists running on caffeine and sheer willpower. As a young woman pouring everything into painting, my world smelled constantly of turpentine and linseed oil, a scent that clung stubbornly to my clothes, my hair, even the pages of my books. My tiny apartment wasn't just home. It was my studio, my sanctuary, my battleground. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against every wall, threatening to spill out into the hallway. Tubes of acrylics and oils colonized the coffee table, sketchbooks piled high on the lone armchair. It wasn't the glamorous artist's life you see in movies. It was often ramen noodles for dinner again because cadmium red was obscenely expensive, but it was authentically mine. Every brushstroke, every color mixed, every frustrating attempt to capture the light just right, it all felt like building something tangible out of dreams I'd held onto since childhood. There were days the blank canvas felt like an accusation, moments where self-doubt whispered insidious lies in my ear. But then, a breakthrough, a passage that finally worked, a texture that sang, and the sheer, unadulterated joy of creation would rush back in, sweeping away the uncertainty. Slowly, painstakingly, I started finding my footing. Small gallery shows, a few commissions, the occasional sale that felt like winning the lottery. Each small success was a precious drop of fuel, keeping the engine of my ambition running. Then came the invitation to the Lakeside Charity Auction. This wasn't just another local show. This was the event. Prestigious, attended by serious collectors, influential critics, the kind of people who could change an artist's trajectory overnight. Donating a major piece felt like stepping onto a much bigger stage, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I chose Convergence, a large abstract piece I'd wrestled with for months. It was about the messy, volatile point where opposing forces meet, conflict and resolution, shadow and light. It felt deeply personal, maybe my most honest work yet. Getting it into this auction felt like a key turning in a lock I hadn't dared hope would open. My future felt balanced on a knife's edge, shimmering with terrifying, beautiful potential.
Chloe.
We'd built forts together, shared secrets whispered under blankets, navigated the treacherous waters of high school dances and first crushes side by side. For 2 decades, she was the fixed point in my constellation. Or so I thought. Looking back now, with the painful clarity of hindsight, the foundations had been crumbling for years. She was the charismatic sun, and I, apparently, was meant to stay comfortably in her orbit. When I started dedicating serious time to my art in college, her praise always felt thin, like a costume worn over something else. "Oh, that's really intense, Maya," she'd murmur, head tilted, eyes scanning the canvas, but never truly seeing it. The word good rarely featured. The shift became undeniable about a year before the auction. I'd received a modest regional award, accompanied by a small article in the local paper. Chloe's congratulations felt forced, brittle. She quickly steered the conversation elsewhere, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes whenever someone else brought it up. Then the dig started, couched as friendly banter. Wow. Must be nice just getting to splash paint around all day while the rest of us work real jobs, she'd say, conveniently forgetting I juggled a part-time library assistant job specifically to fund my hobby. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, each comment chipping away at my confidence and our shared history. The first blatant act of sabotage, though I didn't fully recognize it as such then, occurred at a group exhibition. I was thrilled just to be included. Chloe arrived late, all breezy smiles. Later, I overheard snippets of her conversation with a couple who had been expressing genuine interest in my work moments before. Words like derivative, still experimenting, needs refinement. Their earlier enthusiasm evaporated. When I tentatively asked her later if she'd spoken to them, she just waved a dismissive hand. Oh, you know how these things are, Maya. Everyone's a critic. Don't let it get to you. That saccharine smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the first time I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the gallery's air conditioning. Our friendship didn't end with a bang, but with a slow, painful fade, suffocated by her veiled resentment and my growing, weary distrust. We simply stopped reaching out. Seeing her RSVP for the auction felt like finding a spider in my bed, startling and deeply unwelcome. Why crawl back now, after all this time? What did she want? In the final stretch before the auction, Chloe's name kept popping up in unsettling ways. She didn't call or text me directly. The silence between us remained unbroken, but her inquiries echoed back to me through mutual acquaintances. Apparently, she'd been asking pointed questions. Who were the major collectors attending? What prices did similar works fetch last year? And most chillingly, had anyone heard what the reserve price was for my painting, Convergence? That information wasn't public. Why the sudden, intense interest in the financial specifics? I tried telling myself she was just nosy, maybe even feeling a pang of guilt and considering making a supportive gesture. But my instincts screamed louder, warning me that Chloe's motives were rarely straightforward and almost never altruistic. Then came the online whispers. Anonymous comments started appearing on the auction house's social media posts featuring previews of the art. Nothing overtly libelous, just insidious little jabs aimed squarely at my piece. The composition feels chaotic, not intentional. A bit amateurish for this level of auction, don't you think? Color palette is rather harsh. I couldn't prove it was her fingers typing those words, but the tone, that specific blend of faint praise and cutting criticism, was pure Chloe. It felt like she was trying to undermine its value before the bidding even began, planting seeds of doubt in potential buyers' minds. Amidst this rising tide of anxiety, I tried to stay focused. Convergence needed to be perfect. I triple-checked the framing, arranged professional transport, agonized over my artist statement. I researched the attendees, rehearsed answers to potential questions, trying to project a confidence I increasingly didn't feel. One rainy afternoon, just 3 days before the auction, I was at the auction house finalizing some details. As I was leaving, I saw Chloe emerging from a side office, deep in conversation with Mark Jennings. He'd always been a sort of hanger-on in our old circle, a bit socially awkward, perpetually trying too hard to impress Chloe, laughing loudest at her meanest jokes. They stopped talking abruptly when they saw me. Chloe quickly, almost furtively, slipped a small, plain white envelope into Mark's hand. He pocketed it hastily, avoiding my eyes completely before muttering an excuse and practically fleeing down the corridor. Chloe just offered me a brittle, unreadable smile.
Maya.
Fancy seeing you here. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, the image of that envelope burning in my mind. What was that about? Why Mark? The unease solidified into a knot of genuine fear in my stomach. The auction wasn't just an opportunity anymore. It felt like walking into a trap. The preview night pulsed with a low thrum of money and expectation. Champagne fluted clinked, polite laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and collectors prowled the gallery floor with practiced eyes. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress for the 10th time, and positioned myself near Convergence, trying to radiate calm professionalism while my insides churned. People did stop. They looked. A well-known critic complimented my use of texture. The owner of a contemporary gallery asked thoughtful questions about my process. For fleeting moments, the dark cloud of suspicion lifted, and I allowed myself to imagine a positive outcome. Then my eyes found Chloe. She was holding court near the entrance, laughing charmingly with a group of people, but her gaze kept darting across the room. Not at the art. At the people. Specifically, she kept glancing towards the far corner, where Mark stood awkwardly by himself, looking deeply uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly too tight. He clutched a glass of untouched champagne like a lifeline. I watched, pretending to study a nearby sculpture. Chloe subtly caught Mark's eye. A tiny, almost imperceptible tilt of her head towards my painting. Mark's gaze flickered over to Convergence, then darted away nervously. He took a sudden, large gulp of his champagne. And just like that, the puzzle pieces slammed together with brutal, sickening force. The questions about the reserve price. The anonymous online comments. The furtive meeting. The envelope passed between them. Mark's awkward presence here tonight. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was a plan. Shill bidding. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Mark was here to artificially inflate the price of my painting. Chloe wasn't planning to buy it herself. Not really. She was using Mark as a puppet.
Why?
Perhaps to drive the price so ridiculously high that no genuine bidder would touch it, ensuring it remained unsold. A public failure for me. Or maybe Mark would place the winning bid, only to inevitably default on the payment later, leaving the painting in limbo, tarnishing my reputation with the auction house and the collectors. Either scenario achieved her goal, sabotage. The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. She knew how much this auction meant. She knew the years of struggle, the hopes pinned on this single night. And she had orchestrated this elaborate fraud, pulling strings with Mark, her willing pawn, all seemingly just for the satisfaction of watching me fall. The hurt was sharp, visceral, but it was quickly consumed by a wave of glacial fury. All those years of shared history, twisted into this ugly spectacle of vengeance. I continued to observe them throughout the evening, keeping my expression neutral. Chloe would shoot Mark brief, coded glances. A slight nod here, a raised eyebrow there. They were finalizing their signals, rehearsing their parts for the main performance. But her arrogance was her downfall. She thought she was being clever, manipulative, invisible. She thought I was still the quiet, easily intimidated Maya she used to know. She underestimated me. Deeply. Knowing her plan, or at least the bones of it, gave me an edge. She had set a trap, but maybe, just maybe, I could be the one to spring it. I spent the next day consumed not just by nerves but by strategy. How could I expose this without looking like a bitter, paranoid wreck myself? I needed something concrete. Then I remembered Mark, his constant complaints about being broke, his dead-end job. There was absolutely no way he could genuinely afford a painting likely to fetch thousands, let alone the inflated price they were planning. That was the weak link. His inability to financially back up the bids Chloe would undoubtedly push him to make. My anger began to solidify into cold, hard resolve. She wanted a performance? Fine. But I would be the one writing the final act. Auction day dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the storm brewing inside me. My nerves felt like frayed wires, but beneath the anxiety hummed a core of steely determination. I chose my outfit with care, a simple, professional dark blue dress. I wanted to look composed, credible. Entering the auction hall felt like stepping onto a stage set for battle. The air buzzed with anticipation, thick with the sense of expensive perfume and old money. I found a seat towards the side, offering a clear line of sight to the auctioneer's podium, the projected screens displaying the lots, and, crucially, the section where Chloe would likely position herself. Sure enough, Chloe swept in minutes later, radiating a false warmth that didn't reach her eyes, dressed in designer clothes that screamed, "Look at me." She settled near the back, scanning the room with an air of ownership. A short while later, Mark shuffled in, looking even more nervous than the night before. He took a seat several rows away from Chloe, attempting to blend into the crowd, head down. My pulse quickened. Showtime. The auction began. Jewelry sparkled, sculptures gleamed, other paintings found new homes. The bidding was brisk, but followed a predictable rhythm. Then, Lot 47. My stomach lurched. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Lot 47, Convergence, a powerful abstract work by the exciting emerging artist Maya Collins. My painting filled the large screens. The auctioneer launched into his spiel, praising its energy and composition. My hands felt clammy, my mouth dry. "We shall open the bidding at $3,000, he announced crisply. Do I hear 3,000? A woman in the front row, a known collector, raised her paddle. 3,000. Thank you. 3,500. Another paddle went up across the aisle. 3,500. 4,000. Mark's paddle shot up. 4,000. His voice cracked slightly. Heads turned briefly in his direction. 4,500, the auctioneer prompted. The first collector nodded. 45. 5,000. Mark countered instantly, almost before the auctioneer finished speaking. Nerves or instruction? Definitely instruction. A subtle shift occurred in the room's energy. A few whispers started. This pace was unusually aggressive for an opening. I risked a glance back. Chloe wore a mask of serene indifference, but her eyes, fixed on the podium, glittered with intensity. 5,500? The first collector hesitated, studied the painting on the screen again, then gave a decisive nod. 55. 6,000. Mark practically shouted, paddle unwavering. More murmurs now. People were looking at Mark more closely, this unknown, overly eager bidder. Who was he? $6,000 it is, the auctioneer confirmed, his professional gaze sweeping the audience. A strong showing for this piece. Do I hear 6,500? Silence stretched for a moment. The first collector slowly shook her head, signaling she was out. The second bidder looked thoughtful, but didn't move. It seemed Mark's aggressive tactics were working, scaring off genuine interest. Then, Chloe raised her paddle. 6,500. Her voice was clear and confident. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was this? A fake bidding war between the puppet master and the puppet to make it seem legitimate? To drive the price even higher into the stratosphere before Mark inevitably won? It was diabolical. 6,500 from the lady at the back, the auctioneer declared, acknowledging Chloe. Are we hearing 7,000? Mark's paddle was up again before the question was fully out. 7,000. The room was buzzing now. This was drama. 7,500. Chloe snapped back, her voice ringing with faux passion. The moment I dreaded, now unfolding with sickening precision. 7,500, the auctioneer echoed, his eyes scanning for any other interest.
He looked pointedly at Mark.
Mark paused for a beat, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He glanced, almost imperceptibly, towards Chloe. She gave the tiniest, almost invisible shake of her head. Mark lowered his paddle. Ah, the endgame. Scare everyone off with Mark's crazy bids. Let Chloe win it at an inflated price she likely never intended to pay, making her look like the passionate art lover while humiliating me when the sale inevitably fell through later. Or perhaps she did intend to pay, just to possess the piece out of spite? Either way, the foundation was fraud. $7,500, the auctioneer called, raising his gavel slightly. A final call then. Fair warning. Going once. My breath hitched. Going twice.
Now.
It had to be now. Before the word sold could seal my fate, I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, my palms were slick with sweat, but I locked my knees. My voice, when I spoke, was surprisingly clear, amplified by the sudden, absolute silence that fell over the hall. "Excuse me, Mr. Auctioneer." Every single head swiveled in my direction. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. Chloe froze mid-smirk, her face draining of color as she registered who was speaking. Pure shock, quickly followed by dawning panic, contorted her features. Mark looked like he might actually faint. Yes. The auctioneer frowned, clearly unaccustomed to such interruptions. "My sincere apologies for disrupting the proceedings," I began, keeping my tone measured, respectful but firm. My voice didn't waver. "However, I have profound concerns regarding the integrity of the bidding process for this specific lot. Namely, the bids placed by paddle number." I glanced pointedly at Mark, whose face was now beet red. 217 and paddle number. My gaze locked onto Chloe's. 184. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Whispers erupted. Chloe shot to her feet, her face flushed with fury. Mark sank lower in his seat, wishing himself invisible. "Bidder 217, a Mr. Mark Jennings," I continued, the names dropping like stones into the silence, "and bidder 184, Miss Chloe Williams, a former acquaintance of mine, appear to have engaged in collusive bidding." The term hung in the air. I personally witnessed them conferring shortly before this auction began, and their subsequent bidding pattern strongly suggests a coordinated effort to artificially inflate the price, potentially defrauding legitimate bidders here today and, crucially, the very charity this event is intended to support. The auctioneer's expression shifted from annoyance to sharp concern. He looked from me to a sputtering Chloe, then to the utterly mortified Mark. "Miss Collins," he said gravely, "these are extremely serious accusations." "They are," I acknowledged calmly, "and I believe easily investigated. Perhaps standard procedure could be followed?" Verifying bidder 217's registration and, more pertinently, his financial pre-qualification or capacity to complete a transaction of this value. "I suspect you might find discrepancies." I held my ground, meeting the auctioneer's gaze directly. I knew Mark's financial situation. This was Chloe's fatal miscalculation. "This is absolutely ludicrous," Chloe shrieked, finding her voice. "She's making this up. She's bitter, vindictive. This is personal. She's trying to ruin her own sale out of spite." Her voice pitched higher with each denial, ringing with desperation rather than conviction. But the damage was done. Her panicked outburst only seemed to confirm suspicions in the eyes of the onlookers. People were openly staring now, murmuring amongst themselves, their gazes shifting between the disgraced trio, Chloe, Mark, and me. The auctioneer, a man clearly experienced in handling unexpected situations, held up a hand, calling for quiet. He exchanged a few hushed words with a staff member via his microphone. The staffer nodded curtly and made a beeline for Mark. He spoke quietly but firmly, requesting Mark's registration documents and proof of funds. Mark fumbled helplessly in his pockets, his face slick with sweat, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He produced nothing that satisfied the staffer. After a minute that stretched into an eternity, the staff member returned to the podium and conferred quietly with the auctioneer. The auctioneer's face became granite. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice was now steel wrapped in velvet. "Due to discovered irregularities concerning the bidding on Lot 47, all bids submitted by paddle numbers 217 and 184 are hereby declared null and void." He fixed his gaze first on Mark, then squarely on Chloe. "Security will escort these individuals from the premises immediately. Furthermore, Their attendance at any future Lakeside Foundation events is permanently prohibited. Chloe let out a strangled cry of disbelief. You can't do this, I demand, but two uniformed, yet discreet, security personnel were already moving purposefully towards her and Mark. Mark went quietly, head bowed, the picture of utter shame. Chloe, however, erupted. She started shouting accusations, insults, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million ugly pieces. It was a truly spectacular meltdown, culminating in her being firmly, but forcibly, guided towards the exit, her final shriek echoing slightly as the heavy doors swung shut behind her. A stunned, almost electric silence filled the hall. The auctioneer took a moment, then addressed the room again, his composure impeccable. My profound apologies for that unfortunate incident, ladies and gentlemen, and my sincere gratitude to Miss Collins for her courage and integrity. He gave me a brief, respectful nod, a gesture that spoke volumes. Now, if we may resume, we shall restart the bidding for Lot 47, Convergence. The last valid bid stands at $5,500 from the collector in the front row. He looked expectantly at the woman who Mark had initially scared off. Do I hear $6,000? The tension snapped. The collector smiled, a glint of appreciation in her eyes, and confidently raised her paddle. 6,000. Immediately, another bidder joined in. The bidding continued, clean, transparent, and genuinely enthusiastic this time. Minutes later, the gavel finally fell.
Sold.
For $8,000 to bidder number 78. The buyer was the gallery owner I'd spoken to during the preview night. She caught my eye across the room and gave me a warm, congratulatory smile. Leaving the auction hall later felt like walking out of a whirlwind. The adrenaline slowly drained away, leaving me feeling strangely calm, almost lightheaded, but deeply, profoundly relieved. Chloe's very public disgrace was the main topic of conversation as people filed out. There was no sympathy, only condemnation for her blatant and malicious actions. She had single-handedly destroyed her own reputation within the community she clearly cared so much about impressing. Mark, I heard later through the grapevine, was mortified beyond words and promptly vanished from the social scene altogether. I never saw or heard from Chloe again. The aftermath unfolded quietly, but significantly. The gallery owner who purchased Convergence proved to be a true champion of my work. That sale led directly to gallery representation, and the following year, I had my first solo exhibition. The story of the auction drama, while initially mortifying, inadvertently created a narrative around my work, the artist who wouldn't be bullied, who fought for her art's integrity. It wasn't the kind of attention I'd ever sought, but it undeniably helped open doors that might have otherwise remained closed. That entire ordeal with Chloe carved some deep lessons into me. It was a brutal education in the destructive power of jealousy and the way it can curdle even the oldest friendships. It forced me to confront the pattern of subtle undermining I had ignored for far too long, blinded by loyalty and shared history. But more than anything, it taught me the non-negotiable value of my own work and the critical importance of establishing and defending boundaries, no matter how uncomfortable the confrontation. Exposing Chloe wasn't just about revenge, though the justice felt undeniably good. It was an act of self-preservation, of reclaiming my own story. My studio still smells like turpentine, canvases still lean against the walls, but now, when I paint, there's a new resilience in the strokes, a quiet confidence born not just of hope, but of knowing I can face down the storm and keep creating.